right, everyone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Aware Athlete Show. I'm your host, Scott Forrester, and today our guest is Flo Zurkinden, and she is first a mom, an entrepreneur, an ultra runner, and a coach. So Flo, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott.
So you have a very inspiring story, very valuable story, and maybe we could get started with a little bit of background. You grew up in Switzerland. I've never been to Switzerland. It sounds very beautiful. Can you talk about some of the good things about growing up in Switzerland?
Sure. So I grew up in a small town called Fribourg, and nothing special about it. Really, kind of typical small town in the middle of Switzerland, which is already a tiny country. But I think the best memories that I have from growing up there is obviously being in the mountains. We have some of the most beautiful mountains in Switzerland, and my mom and dad were always very active people. They still are. They're in their 70s now, and they still, go out and hike and ski and do tons of things. But really just taking me and my brothers out in the mountains was, some of the best memories we had. We were all together as a family. We were obviously, breathing the fresh air, having fun. And my dad actually took me as soon as I was, able to fit in that baby carrier. I wasn't even walking yet, but he would take me on the slopes, and I had the most fun ever. I actually still have memories of that. But then as soon as I could walk, he put me on the little baby skis, and we have tons and tons of really cool footage. Back in the days they had those old, like I don't even know what they're called now, but these old films, and we'd get together in the basement and watch us fall. And I mean, there are some pretty epic moments, that's for sure.
Yeah
That
is not knowing a whole lot about Switzerland. That is the first thing that comes to mind is mountains.
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. So so skiing is so natural for you.
Yeah, it's very natural. Later on, when I was a teenager, my brother actually took on snowboarding, and him and I were very close, and I just wanted to be with him all the time. So I decided to start snowboarding, and I actually loved it. Just had a lot of fun snowboarding. So I do both. More snowboarding than skiing, just because I just like it a little more, but they're both awesome. Yeah.
So now here you are in America.
Yeah.
And, could you contrast the two cultures, growing up in Switzerland and what that was like, and then now you're also on the East Coast, and that I'm on the West Coast, and you got two different cultures there too. But
yes.
So can you comment on the two different cultures? What's different about being in Switzerland or about being in America?
Well, I think first of all, I don't know, a lot of people know that Switzerland is about the size. It's actually smaller than the size of Connecticut. So it's a really small country. Obviously, growing up there, it's just a dream. I mean, it's heaven, and I realize now, being here, that I didn't appreciate it enough. You just kind of grow up in an environment and you take it for granted that that's where you are, that's where you've always been, and you really take all those good things for granted. When I came to the States, I was so culture shocked. It actually took me a few years to get used to the new culture. Everything's bigger here. Everything is huge, from roads and cars and trucks, and the food is completely different. There's way more choices. So it's just kind of like you're being transported into this huge bubble of, just, it's like a melting pot of people too, different cultures, and it's very different language too. Sorry, my puppy is playing with his toy. I hope that's not, let me know if you want me to take it away.
Yeah.
But it's very it's very different. I kind of look at Switzerland now as this, little wonderland, because everything is maintained there. The people are living at a slower pace. They appreciate nature and simple things more, whereas here, especially on the East Coast, people are just wired to work, and they literally live to work, whereas in Switzerland and Europe it's a little different. People want to actually take advantage of life, and they really just work to make a living, not to, that's not just what they're most focused on. But it's just a completely different mentality, and it does take time to get used to it. I personally have never gotten used to the East Coast, and I'm hoping to move west soon. I just, my kids are growing up, and I'm gonna let them get through high school, and then once they're in college, I told them, I said, I'm gone. I'm leaving.
Yeah. So I know you love Colorado.
I do love Colorado.
Again, the mountains there.
Yeah, it reminds me of Switzerland. It actually brings out so many amazing memories that I have, and I just feel most like myself in the mountains. There's just this, some people are, beach people, and they just go to the beach, and it's just, it takes your stress down, and you just feel already you're in that quiet, peaceful environment. The mountains do that, and they completely transform me, and I typically like quiet environments because they're just the best environments for me to recharge and really just get my energy up. So
yeah, so I love nature. I love being in the West. We've spent a lot of time in Wyoming, Colorado, most, and Oregon tends to be actually, that was one of the last places settled in the country, so it's still a little bit open. So no matter where you grow up, you have to grow up. And that's
for sure.
Just like all of life, that has its challenges. Could you now tell us a little bit about the personal challenges of growing up, period, and growing up in Switzerland and making the big move to the United States? That required a lot of flexibility, a different culture, different language. I think you already knew English.
Yeah, I knew a little bit of English. My mom is half English, half Swiss. So I knew a little bit of English. My mom made a point to speak to us in English growing up. So I was familiar with the English language, but she's British. So, American there's still slight differences in the language, but I already had a head start as far as the language. That was huge for me.
Did you have a British accent?
I did have a British accent, but it's completely gone.
Yeah.
And now people actually tell me sometimes they hear my accent a little bit, but most people don't notice it. But I've been in the States for 20 years, so yeah. But yeah, it was there was a lot going on actually when I was 6 years old. My father actually moved our whole family to Larchmont, New York for a year. He worked for a Swiss bank, and he got transferred. Here, let me take that. I'm just gonna take that to me. Good. He's still a puppy, so he fights me a little bit. So, we moved to the States for a year, then we moved back to Switzerland, and I was probably around 8 years old when we moved back. The challenge was that I was a year ahead. Going back to school, I was a year ahead from, intermediate school all the way into college. So in intermediate school and high school, I just really struggled, fitting in. It was tough. I was bullied a lot. It was different. And, I knew different languages. My mom used to always tell me, oh, the kids are jealous, don't pay attention. But it's tough as a child, being bullied all the time, not having friends, looking different. I think all of us have gone through some type of bullying or bad experiences in school. But for me, it kept happening until, well, probably until I dropped. I actually didn't complete college. Well, I completed college, because college here is actually high school in Switzerland. It's very different. I would say, university is what they call college here. So I actually didn't complete that because I was all over the place. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I kind of lost myself around the age of 12, 13 years old. I was, I just never fit in. And I didn't have a stable environment at home, just because, my brothers were teenagers and my parents literally just really struggled with keeping that strong foundation and the connection that they had with us. And so, we actually started looking for all those things kids need, right? Validation and love and connection. I was looking, outside of my home because I didn't get it there. We just grew up in a very, very strict environment. And, I have a great relationship with my parents now. It was very rocky for a very long time, but I've talked to my parents enough, especially my mom, and she apologized so many times. It's just like, you're kind of raised in a certain way, and you sort of tend to repeat that with your children, and sometimes you just don't know how to handle things. You only know what you know. And so yeah, it was tough. I mean, I really went down the wrong path, and I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, and I just really completely lost myself. And then I had other, things happen that really just brought me down into depression and massive, chronic anxiety, and even, I had suicidal thoughts as a child. Like it was very tough. But eventually, I was able to grow out of that, but it wasn't until my late 30s, actually. So I lived with a lot of trauma for a long time.
So you grew up in a very strict environment, and I think the American culture, you talked about people working all the time. That's actually very achievement oriented, very it fosters negative self-talk. I think a lot our culture does.
Yes.
And, so you really didn't escape a strict environment by coming to the United States, probably. What do you think?
Not really. I mean, I was just very sheltered as a child, and I wasn't able to do, the things that kids do, even just kind of getting together, hang out with my friends and things like that. I'm not even talking about going to parties and things like that, because that I just definitely was not allowed to do. But it's, you're so isolated, and then, your friends make fun of you because, you're just different, right? It's just like,
Yeah,
and it's funny because I'm a parent of teenagers. My kids are 14 and 16 now, and I see it with my daughter. She really struggles in that environment. Teenagers are typically very self-absorbed people, and they get mean. Kids are mean, right? It's terrible. I've always made a point to teach kindness in my home, but it's not always reciprocated, wherever you go. I mean, that's just life. But yes, it's true. Moving to the States, I definitely entered this new realm of it's a cultural shock, really, to just, come here, because you're constantly expected to do more, to be more, bigger is better. And
yeah.
You sort of fall into that trap of constantly needing to achieve. And as an entrepreneur, especially, it's difficult because you're so hard on yourself that it's never good enough. And then you carry that negative energy, and it doesn't help, you grow at all. It actually kind of, does the opposite. So
Yeah, and that's pretty interesting, because you would think that a good work ethic would be a good thing, and it is. But
it is.
Yeah, it is. But you can't, we talk about the two types of stress, eustress, good stress, and then the bad stress that actually destroys you over time. And it's amazing that you can go through a day of work and actually come home feeling worse about yourself. You haven't achieved enough. The boss wasn't happy. You know, that the day wasn't perfect, which it never is. And everything was just kind of oppressive, and you need a breath. But you could go into some other thing that you wanted to do, say to achieve, that was hard, but you're actually proud of yourself when you get done. So two different kinds of stress. Can you comment on how did you get to hanging around with the wrong crowd, and how did that pull you down? What was the influence there? What's the influence of bad people in your life?
It's terrible. I really just grew up with, and that's, mainly the reason I became a life coach, is because I'm so passionate about that. And I see people, on an everyday basis, just really struggling with their mind and their negative thoughts. And a lot of the times those thoughts are unconscious.
Yes.
So you're basically walking around doing the everyday things, and you don't even notice the thoughts going through your head. It's just become the norm. And a lot of the times those negative thoughts, they just, that's all you hear all day.
Yeah.
So when you have, a negative environment that matches your internal dialogue, even though it's not good for you, it's normal and it's comfortable. And the brain always wants to be comfortable. I mean, we were wired to survive. We weren't wired to thrive. And I think that's where, when people, and I never knew that, I always thought there's something wrong with me. I see all these people being happy and successful and all that good stuff. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why am I, constantly attracting these negative people and negative environment? Everything is so hard. Life is just difficult. And, there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain, we all feel pain, and pain is actually conducive to growth, right? As soon as you get uncomfortable, it gets a little painful, you can grow from that. But suffering is not. Suffering is a negative thing that typically takes you down, a spiraling, I call it, you're going down the deep end, like, really quickly. And that's when, you're going to trying to heal yourself with alcohol, drugs, and anything that you can grab, right?
To make things
and that's
supposedly easier.
Yeah, but it's your mind that's driving your behavior. And I never knew that either, because obviously nobody had told me. My daughter, she gets so mad at me. She's like, you're always talking about the mind. She doesn't want to hear me, but she understands it. I know already that she gets it, and she knows where she needs to do the work. I never knew where to do the work. My parents, we barely even had a relationship when I was a teenager. So I had to figure this all out on my own. But my conditioning when I was a teenager was really just a combination of, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you'll never be able to be rich and successful. My dad was a very successful businessman. And my mom was a teacher. She absolutely loved what she did. I just never had belief in myself. So you carry on all of this baggage with you for years and years and years. It becomes normal. Eventually, you start looking for that, because that's comfortable, even though it's toxic. That's why so many people who are in toxic relationships, abusive, things that they know that's not normal, that's not good.
Yeah.
it is normal for that person.
Exactly.
So
That's
it's
our habits, even that when they don't work, are all we know.
exactly.
They're more, they have a kind of comfortableness.
Mhm.
And
And that's what the brain does. The brain always wants to go back to what's comfortable. And in order to reverse that, you really have to be extremely aware of your thoughts. Constantly just creating awareness has been life-changing for me. It changes everything.
yeah,
But it's difficult because that's when you start noticing all your flaws and all your, all the things that you think and do, and you have to be prepared to see that part of you.
yeah. And you talk about pain and suffering. I think we all suffer a little bit
We
because
do.
we're all a little bit ignorant. And what I like, a couple of people have said lately that um, you can't control everything that happens in life, and you're not meant to. But almost always you can make it worse.
Yes.
That implies that by not making it worse, you can make it a lot better.
Mhm.
I really like that. And it was many decades into life before I discovered that not only can you live consciously, but you don't just have a responsibility to live consciously to yourself, but to the whole world. I think you have a
Absolutely.
responsibility to live consciously. So
Yeah.
how did you make that breakthrough? How did you make the transition from unconscious living to more conscious living?
It took me years. I really just, I can tell you, it started when I was around 30, I would say 36, and I'm 41 now. So it wasn't too long ago, but I would say, actually it was a little earlier than that. And when I started running, I was not athletic at all, going to school or anything like that. I mean, I did play tennis. My mom was a champion, a state champion back in Switzerland. She was an excellent tennis player. So she taught me how to play tennis, but I didn't really go very regularly. It was more like, mom wants me to play tennis, so I'm going to play tennis kind of thing. I was very artsy. I loved to play the piano and paint and really express myself through art. So sports, wasn't really my thing. But again, it's funny. It's more of a, conditioning. It's like you tell yourself, that you're not good. And
Exactly.
that's really just because my mom yelled at me constantly when she taught me to play. She was a terrible teacher, amazing player, but horrible teacher. So when somebody just, yells at you all the time, then you start thinking that you suck, right? And that's how, I'm not athletic, I'll never be good, at sports. Turns out I'm a fairly decent runner, but when I started running in 2008, back then I was married. When I came here, I actually came here on a fiance visa, which is called a K1 visa, because I met my now ex-husband in Switzerland, and that was like in the midst of my teenage years. I was really young. I was 19 years old when I met him, and back then I had dropped out of school. I was waitressing to make money and make enough money to pay for my apartment, and the rest of the time I just partied. That's all I did. So that was life. There wasn't much about it, about much good about my life, other than I just, okay, well, what am I going to do? Just, I have to make money. And, I knew I was good at that. But then, we met and we started dating, and sure enough, it was definitely not the right way to go, but I went there and I moved, and, surely enough, like, 4 years later, I just knew I had done I've just done the wrong thing. But, then by then you're just kind of in that situation, and you're like, well, it's not that I can move back. I had kids, and it's just different. you kind of feel stuck. You're like, well, I can't leave, I have kids and everything. And so I tried to just make the relationship work for so long. And, it was really an emotional roller coaster, it was just a lot of emotional and later on physical abuse. But it's eventually, you get to that point where, Tony Robbins says, and he's somebody that I followed for so long and I learned so much from. He says, people change at the last minute. They really change. They wait and they wait and they wait until it's so uncomfortable that they can't take it anymore. And then, suddenly now it's like, well, the pain to change is lesser than the pain it is to stay in that situation. That's when people change, right? Which is why you see people being so unhealthy, whether physically or emotionally, and you see them stay in those unhealthy relationships, even, I know so many people who have just poor health. And it's only until they get that diagnosis, oh, you have cancer. Oh, suddenly I have to change my life now. I don't have a choice anymore. But that's the brain, right? We're wired like that. And so for me, it was just like running really helped me because, first of all, it was the only time where I was by myself. Any other time that I wasn't running, I had people around me. I either had my kids that I had to take care of, or, my husband at the time, or his family. And it was just constantly a lot of conditioning, that I was going through, and I couldn't be myself. And I was just not feeling great, but you also can't think, right? You can't think for yourself. And so running was just an escape. It was just my time with myself.
Yeah.
The only person I heard was myself, right? I would talk to myself during my runs. And I started really getting just amazing feedback from my runs. Like I would just go on my runs and I'd be able to appreciate simple things like, a sunrise. And, sometimes I'd run in the rain. I'd run in any type of weather, and it's new and it's fun, and it's good for our brains, first of all, to be outside and breathe the fresh air. It's extremely beneficial to our health too, our emotional health, to exercise. It has a direct impact on those feel good hormones. So I started to feel good every time I would, during the run, not so much. Like, I was pretty.
Yeah, so that was something that really.
I'm not going to say it was like all good and fun, but it's just like that feeling at the end is just so addictive, right? You just feel so great after you exercise, and it kept me going for more and more and more, and that's how I became a runner. I also joined a running group. So now I started making my own friends. I had new connections. I had a new positive environment, very encouraging environment in the running community. Typically, people are very positive. And that was all new for me. I was just really getting myself out there, which I hadn't, I was just so sheltered. So that just created new opportunities for me to join races and really start accomplishing things. I'll never forget my first 5K. I placed in my age group, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I might actually be good at this,
Yeah.
And so it pumps you up. You start realizing like, oh, maybe I am good at something, and hey, let's give this a try. And so I literally put all the energy that I had, other than, my kids, really, because that's what I did, taking care of the house and the kids. I just put all the rest of that energy into running, and that's all I did. I was running all the time.
That are partying all the time, yeah.
Yeah, I was just running a lot, and it really helped me grow. It helped me with just making myself aware of all of my flaws and all of the negative thinking that was really affecting me, just it was pretty, it's you don't even realize it when you're doing it, but through the training and through just racing and meeting new people and talking to them, I changed. I just started sort of creating this person, that new version of myself, and it was just completely life-changing. But
Yeah.
running also helps you, build patience and persistence. It's not an easy sport. It's an extremely mental sport. So there were many times that I would sort of hit, a little bump, or I would get injured, and I have to somehow figure out a way to overcome that. So, anytime I was faced with a struggle, I had to find a solution for it. And I was so passionate about running that anytime something wrong happened, I was determined to find that solution. And then that's how I kind of started changing, rewiring my brain, where I was not so much focused on the problem. I was really focused on finding the solution. And, I was also listening. I was listening to Tony Robbins like constantly in my car. I was turning on these, they're free YouTube videos. It's like, you don't have to pay for a coach. Like, you can do this. It takes a long time when you're doing it on your own, because you have no idea where to start. You have no idea what you're doing. But I was just constantly listening to that positive feedback. I was learning about how the mind works, and Tony Robbins it's excellent, right? For you to just listen to that. And so I started learning so much about how the mind works, and how you change, and how you become more joyful, and gratitude and awareness and all those good things. And then it's just like you're entering this new world, and you're like, it's like addictive. Yeah.
So running was really something that helped you make a tremendous transition, and get out of your head a little bit, be in your body, be in nature, get healthier. Running does that for you, feeds your brain, actually, that circulation and just a general sense of health. And then there's a big sense of community in running too.
Yeah.
And being with other people that way. And you really needed that time, I'm sure, with yourself, and away from that toxic relationship, but that you were in at the time. Because when you're in a really close toxic relationship, I would say it's very hard to break out of that unless you.
It's very difficult. It's extremely difficult. Yeah.
So running, it's done so much for you, so much for me, so much for most everybody who's tried it. It's a wonderful thing. It's one of the most natural things that we can do, walking and running. And so that probably leads us a little bit into, now you've already talked really about, you've kind of hit on what a growth mindset is, because that's what you were going through those years. And you were open to it. You were open to leaving some of those habits. And you've actually set the stage for emotional maturity, emotional health. You've talked about that a little bit, just through your own process of growth. So since you are a mom, that's certainly a process of growth, because I've had kids. And I know nobody's a perfect parent, and you look back.
That's
and
true.
now as a grandparent, I go, all right, I love these kids. Now you can raise them.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's a tough thing. It's nobody does it perfectly. But it sounds like you're passing along some things that they can't fully appreciate now, but they really will.
They don't even appreciate. Oh man, it's tough, but I have to remind myself that those are things that you realize later on in life. And the only thing that I need to do is make sure that I instill those beliefs and the values and all that good stuff, because it's a tough world. I mean, I think it's tougher now to be a teenager than it ever was. They have so many pressures and distractions. It's really challenging, with our world evolving the way that it is. So, it's good. I really enjoy being a parent, but I can only imagine how much harder it would have been had I not gone through this growth myself. And, you know, a good part of me being a parent, what was in the early years, I didn't have that knowledge. I didn't have that, you know, obviously kids back then are smaller, and, you know, you have a different relationship with them than I do now when they're teenagers. But still, it does affect the way that you parent. I mean, hugely.
Now, you've talked about obstacles in life and then figuring out how to overcome those. And you've, for people listening, you've really had bigger obstacles than you've given yourself credit for in this interview. But did you get into UTMB once? Did you do that, or you had that as an aspiration?
I had that as an aspiration.
And
Yeah.
so just briefly, and are you training? Your training has picked up recently, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has picked up. I've had some challenges the past couple of years with, you know, the 2 brain injuries.
Yeah, so some of our listeners don't know about that, and that requires a tremendous amount of patience and yeah.
And I really thought, you know, it's funny, like all those years I was growing and hitting. I mean, it's, you know, growth is different for everybody, but there's so much pain you go through that I know that's probably what makes us want to quit, you know, because again, our brain is so bent on staying comfortable. And, you know, I constantly challenge myself to get, you know, to just get out of my comfort zone. And it becomes easier as you do it, but then what's difficult is the challenges that you didn't expect, right? So the challenges you expect, you're like, oh, you know, that's okay. I'm prepared. I know what I need to do. You know, you have that ability to prepare yourself, but it's the things that come at you that you never expected. Those are really the tough parts. And you know, I've wanted to quit more times than I can even count. That's just natural. I think we all do. Ultimately, you know, in 2019, I was running one day. I was running outside. It was actually snowing, and that's one of my favorite times to go running because there's usually nobody on the trail, and it's so quiet. And snow is there's something so magical about running in the snow. But I was just all by myself, you know, took my dog Maddie, and just like, I'm gonna go run. This is gonna be magical. Sure enough, it had been a very icy winter, and I didn't notice. I fell twice, actually. The first time I slipped, and I kind of caught myself, and I fell on my hip, and I was like, oh, bummer, you know. Happens. I turned the other way, and I was probably a mile away from my house, and I didn't notice there was a huge sheet of ice underneath the snow. And I literally, I mean, that fall was brutal. I just slipped, fell backwards, hit my head on the concrete. I mean, it was, I felt it, and it didn't lose consciousness, but I remember just not being able to move because everything hurt so bad. You know, my dog went flying down the road and eventually ran back to me, and she's licking my face, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I tried to get up, and I couldn't get up. It was my back was just, I mean, everything was so tight, and I was in so much pain. I'm like, what the heck, you know? But I didn't really realize. And then soon enough, you know, the adrenaline kicks in, and I was able to get up, and I'm walking. And, you know, I had a lot of pain in my neck, my back. You know, you fall on your back and your head on the concrete, it's going to hurt. But I walked back home. I even must have jogged a little bit. You know, I go back home, and, you know, I see my boyfriend, and I'm like, oh, I had a pretty bad fall, but I think I'm okay, you know. And sure enough, the next 2 days, you know, I was just sore. And then on the third day, it just hit me, and I knew I had a concussion. I couldn't even get up. Just opening my eyes, it was probably early morning, the sun was rising, and just your eyes hurt, you can't even look outside. I had like every traumatic brain injury symptom you can have, and I ended up going to the doctor, and they told me I had a bad concussion. So it took me about a year to heal from that. It was really bad. I remember having a migraine for 30 days straight. It was not pleasant. I mean, migraines are comfortable, but when you have them for 30 days straight, and yeah, it was really tough because, obviously I couldn't run. I couldn't run for a few months, but that one was actually not so bad. The car accident I was in was last October, that made things 10 times worse. So, going through the first TBI in 2019, I recovered, probably in like 4 or 5 months, I was good to go. I think I even I really pushed myself a little too soon. I tried to do, I actually did an ultra marathon. I went for 100-miler, and, then in retrospect, I was like, yeah, it was probably too soon to do that. But the second one really was probably the toughest, and I'm still dealing with symptoms and things like that. It's just, every time you have a concussion or any type of brain injury, any subsequent brain injury that you have is 10 times worse. The symptoms are worse. It takes longer to recover. It's really tough. So this one, I was actually, rear-ended by 2 cars on the highway in a construction zone. And, just this guy was most likely texting, didn't see, and, rear-ended a guy that hit me. So the 2 cars hit me, and then I started feeling symptoms probably, the next day. Actually, I was driving to New York, and I remember that day I was already feeling a little dizzy, but it didn't hit me until the second day, and then I was just in bed for 3 months. It was 3 weeks straight. I could not walk. I had my vestibular system was out of whack. Everything was a mess. And it's hard because the second time around, how painful it is and how difficult it is to get better. But this one was even worse. So, I mean, thankfully I didn't have any brain bleeds or anything like that, but that recovery was brutal. And so basically 2019, 2020, and now 2021, it's just like, I haven't really done much running at all. I haven't raced in forever. Like, I tried to do a 50-miler back in July. And I had tremendous neck pain that I'm still, dealing with, but it's just, it takes time, and you have to be patient. It's definitely a whole nother level of patient that I did not know. So it's been extremely challenging, but at the same time, it helps me, continuously grow. And I think the one thing that I realized, during my concussion is, you're in so much pain. It's just this constant pain that will never stop. Like it's just chronic, right? So you learn to cope, in a different way. And like I said, it's just always like a new level, right? New level, new devil. But that concussion really taught me to meditate. I was never one to meditate before, even though I was doing all the work and doing all the, meditating was one thing that, because I've always been a high strung, go type person, I hadn't mastered I hadn't mastered stillness, which is something that I feel is extremely difficult nowadays, because we're so, the social media, the technology era is really distracting you from, every minute, any minute that you have is literally, you have something calling you, trying to distract you. And it's not conducive to being still. But when your mind is also conditioned to constantly think about the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, when you try to meditate, you want to give up after, like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, because again, you're laying down and, you typically you want to start with guided meditation. That's actually what I recommend, because I try to meditate without guided meditation, and that's like torture. It's really difficult because your mind is running, right? So you get yourself ready, you lay on the bed and you're like, okay, I'm just going to be still. And your brain, your body's still, but your brain is going like a million miles an hour, right? And you think about the next thing you got to do. Oh, I got to unload the dishwasher. Oh, I got to drive my kid to the practice. Oh, I got to do this. You're like, no, just be still. But your brain is just on constant overload. And so it takes time, again, to recondition your brain. And it takes practice. And too many people give up. I gave up way too quickly. And then I got introduced to Dr. Joe Dispenza, who is just this amazing doctor. And he really masters the art of meditation, and he talks about how to achieve that state. And that helped me a lot. Again, the more you learn, the more you understand. I tell people, you're going to feel like you suck at meditation when you start. Yeah. That's just how it is. But there's no right or wrong way to meditate. It's different for everybody. But at first, you're always going to want to quit, and you're always thinking that you're doing it wrong, because you have these thoughts going through your head. Or like sometimes I have people who tell me, oh, I fall asleep. Well, it's actually not a bad thing to fall asleep, but it's a process. But that actually, during my concussion, I was forced to lay down all day, and I didn't have a choice to get up. So that was actually a really good time for me to start to meditate. And I took the opportunity, although I was a little reluctant, but I took the opportunity, and it actually helped my healing tremendously.
So it sounds like what
Yeah.
you're saying is that the experience of having these injuries actually deepened your experience of being a human being. Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's.
I often say, actually, I often, when you think and you create that perspective, I started thinking, wow, had these accidents not happened, had I not been, stuck to my bed all day, I probably would have, made the time to really learn that. I just did not have a choice, especially that second time around. I couldn't even walk. It was just, well, what am I going to do?
Yeah. So I think there's always been distractions in life even before the electronic age. You could always be thinking of something else you wanted to do, or some place you wanted to go or be or something. But it's really constant now, like you say. Who's not looking at their phone more than they need to be? And I think what you're saying there is there's a couple things. I don't think we really have free will until we can be a little bit undistracted. Otherwise, Absolutely. We're just pulled into the flow of our habits and our particular distractions.
That's for sure.
So now another thing, when you couldn't get out of bed, was that humbling? And was that also a chance to give thanks for the world, for other people that are in your life?
Yeah, it was extremely humbling. I mean, I was in tears I cried so much because, for one, you're devastated because you know what's happening and what it's going to take. Although I didn't even really know what it was going to take, because that time around everything was, 10 times worse. But it's extremely humbling, and you have to face yourself, and the anger, and it's kind of like you go through so many emotions. A lot of anger, just you just I was angry. I was angry for quite a while. It takes a second, and I talk to my kids all the time. My son's starting to drive, and I tell him, I'm like, you think that picking up your phone in the car is, for a couple seconds, just to turn on the your GPS or whatever while you're driving, is not a big deal, but it literally is. It happens in a split second. So I mean, it deepened a lot of my perspective. It really helped me. It is definitely a humbling experience, and then it reinforced also the gratitude that I felt for, literally. I mean, I think on my third week, I started walking again, but it was 10 steps and then back to bed kind of thing. I remember trying to walk outside, and I didn't last. So I had to go home, and, so you're dealing with this all day, every day. Like, for me, being, an athlete and running, ultra marathon distances, to not being able to walk, it's like, goodness, it's
especially devastating. Yeah.
It's especially devastating. It's like your whole life is falling apart. And then you have this little pity party, you start feeling bad about yourself and everything, but then you notice how every single thing is so special. All those things that we take for granted, walking. None of us say, thank you. Thank you, God, for giving me legs to walk every day. It's just those little simple things, like I couldn't cook for my family for the longest time, like things like that. You start feeling really grateful for all these things, and your perspective changes, and then you go outside, and just a simple walk in the sun is like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So it does definitely ground you, and it sort of creates, it creates a lot of character, and you show up differently, definitely, like.
So you are only 41, but you've had a long journey already.
Yeah, I definitely have, yeah.
I think there are a couple of inflection points, and one is where you begin to see, hey, maybe I could live intentionally. Maybe I could be who I want to be. And then it's all overlapping. And then there's another spot where, see, I used to read books and say, what can I get out of them? What can I learn? Well, you can still do that. But sometimes I read books now and I just say, how did he state that? How would I teach that? How does that help me help other people? It's a little bit different reading, because now you're seeing a little bit more of the fine points in the book, rather than trying to grab something out of them. In the same way with life, I think Viktor Frankl said, it's not what we expect to get out of life, it's what life expects from us.
Yes.
And so you move from now this wonderful story that you've told, to actually your coaching. How can I help other people?
Yeah.
That's another transition. So it took you several years to make this transition you've been talking about. Can you talk about how did you get your first clients? Why were they attracted to you? How did this begin to phase from wow, I've got this better life, to exactly precisely how can I share this with someone else and help them?
Well, I actually had the idea to create this coaching business I've always wanted to, always had a strong desire to help people. And it really started when, during my transformation, you know, and as a runner, I was so passionate about helping people. A lot of people used to ask me, oh, you know, how do you train for your runs and things like that? So I actually went from becoming a personal trainer / running coach to then helping people also with nutrition, because I realized that nutrition influences your performance, and you can't be a healthy athlete without really paying attention to what you're putting into your body. But then I also had the realization that you can't be a really healthy person emotionally if you feed yourself junk all day. So, you know, the type of foods that we put in our body influences not just our physical shape, but also our emotional shape and our mindset. So I, you know, I was pretty comfortable coaching people, athletes and things like that. And I was also helping people who wanted to become healthier, and whether they were athletes or not, with their nutrition. And here in the States, you know, there's a big problem with, you know, obviously obesity and health. And I talk about that a little bit. I just blogged about it, actually, the difference in the types of nutritions that are offered here versus, you know, in Switzerland. There's this big conspiracy theory about what food manufacturers are doing to make foods more palatable yet extremely addictive. I mean, it's horrible. So a lot of people are not aware of that. So creating awareness around that is great. But ultimately, what really made me decide to become a mindset / life coach was that I was noticing that a lot of people who desired to lose weight and get healthier and really just get in a better physical shape, they, you know, when they were presented with all the what I call the external factors, so good nutrition, here's a list of foods to avoid, here's a list of things to really focus on, let's add more fresh foods to your diet and everything, they were struggling so much. And even though they were successful, they'd lose weight, you know, in a certain amount of weeks or whatever, they kept struggling. And a lot of them, you know, I would coach them for, you know, whether it was a few weeks to a few months to a few years. And then a few years later, I'd see them and they were back to their old weight and feeling horrible about it. That's what really got me to realize that, you know, it's our mindset and our behaviors that drive our actions. And so you can try any type of exercise regimen, nutritional supplements, program, whatever you want to do, diets, you can do it all. But in order to have true consistency, you have to change your behavior, because it's your behavior that really influences, you know, what you do on a daily basis. And so you can have all the willpower in the world. At the end of the day, if you have either self-limiting beliefs or negative behaviors that are already wired into your brain, they're there. You cannot just decide, oh, I'm going to eat healthy without addressing those negative behaviors. That's where people just get so stuck all the time. And then they start thinking there's something wrong with them. Like, I don't, like, you know, the big thing is like, I don't have enough willpower. It has nothing to do with willpower. You're going to have all the willpower in the world. If you have some self-limiting beliefs that are unconsciously holding you back, but yet they drive your behavior, you can have all the willpower that you want. That's not going to help. So a lot of people are also conditioned to believe that, oh, I'm too old, it's too late. You know, I have an autoimmune disease. It's that much harder for me to get healthy or to lose weight. I can't overcome this. I can't overcome that. And, I've tried so many diets. I can't do this. I have a sweet tooth. I have too many cravings. Everything that I just stated starts in here. Cravings are typically not a physical thing that happens to us. It's really just driven by our emotions. We feel an emotion and we go to food. That's just what it is. So in my coaching practice, what I focus on and what I feel is so much more meaningful, because now I'm really, as a personal trainer, you're helping people train and build muscle and get healthier. Yes. But here I'm going even deeper. I'm really just like digging at the root so that it makes the process so much more efficient and consistent. Once you deal with all of this stuff that holds you back, you literally become this free, you have this freedom that you feel like, all this negative stuff is not weighing you down all the time. And when you have something happening, and we all do, life always throws things at us. Now you have the mindset to focus on solving that issue instead of, the fixed mindset, the typical, feeling bad for yourself and going back into your victim mindset and quitting and all of that, right? It's life-changing. So I still focus on nutrition and fitness because I believe that they're essential to our health. But I really focus on rewiring the brain and helping people dig a little deeper, identify, first of all, the first step is creating awareness and identifying what you really want. What are you looking to achieve? Because a lot of people, they focus on what they don't want. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but because it could be a really good way to figure out what you want by figuring out what you don't want. But if you only get stuck on, oh, I don't want to be fat, that's sort of limiting in a way, right? What do you truly want? A lot of us are afraid to say it even, out loud, because it seems like literally impossible to us. So we kind of settle in our goals and our beliefs and things like that. So I really, I have different, there's simple steps in the program because I want to make things obviously as easy to grasp as possible. But it's really all about identifying what do you want? What does your ideal life look like? What is important to you? So many of us are stuck in situations, relationships, careers, jobs, different things that do not align with our core values. So what are your core values? What is important to you? Once you've established that, you already know now what you're going after and what is really important to you. So you can really kind of focus on that. And then we go into identifying, all right, what is holding you back from getting all of this, right? And then you go into the negative patterns, emotions, self-limiting beliefs.
So really, I don't think anybody's going to say you should never have any willpower. I wouldn't say that. But
absolutely not.
But what you're saying there kind of is that people that have exceptionally strong willpower, that can be a hindrance because they're using the willpower instead of developing the life skills.
Exactly.
So that will actually give you a little bit of temporary success, but you can't hold it.
Exactly.
Whereas maybe if you had a little bit less willpower, you would come to a place where you acknowledge the problem a little bit sooner.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
A very, very strong will can actually be a little bit of hindrance to the deeper process.
Mm-hmm.
Some things that a lot of people wouldn't think of.
Absolutely.
And but the deeper process results in a real free will. You said that gives you real freedom.
Yeah.
And a freedom from just being external.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it affects every single area of your life. when you address the mind and the negative patterns, those negative beliefs that we have about ourselves, and everybody does, right? We all have those. They affect us in every single part of our lives. Some people struggle more with, relationships. Some people struggle more with, their own relationship with themselves. But ultimately, what I do really just, it ends up impacting every area of your life. And there are tools that you can use in those areas too. And that's extremely powerful. When you have those tools, now you can address literally any kind of situation that you're in.
Exactly. So those tools, yeah. So you can, once you know that, you can navigate through some of the difficulties.
Yes.
Once
In a
you
much
know,
easier way. It's just, life becomes a lot less straining. It's nearly effortless because you also create, along the way, when you feel better within yourself, you also gain the confidence, you gain faith, you gain, you have a totally different attitude on life. And so when you have things that come at you, instead of reacting, you just kind of look at them and you respond accordingly. There's not that impulse to react, which is what typically we do, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting too, because if you keep saying, well, I want this, but I always get this,
Mm-hmm.
then that means that there's something in there. There's
Yeah.
some habit that maybe you haven't realized. Maybe it's easier for someone else, maybe a coach, to see what that habit is. But here's another thing I just found kind of useful is that I look at my family, not my parents. I've already done, we've all done that. But I look at my siblings and I say, oh, it's easy to see what's limiting her. And we were raised the same way. And I bet I'm doing some of that, because some of these habits are so subtle that you have to ask these questions. If I'm not getting what I want, I must be doing the same thing over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just to make those discoveries, but to know that those discoveries are there, because as long as the habits are there, you may really want something, but you keep proving to yourself you can't get it, because
Exactly.
you keep
Yeah.
doing the same thing, and you're not quite aware of it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And that's again, that's the brain wanting to feel comfortable. So a lot of us, we justify the circumstances and the negative situations that we're in, and we sometimes purposely self-sabotage in a way. And that's something that I did for years. I'm like, I'm working hard, I'm working hard, I'm working hard. I get nothing, nothing new is happening. Well, eventually you have to start looking at yourself and really dig deeper, because unless, and like I said, it's very unconscious. So, I did do, a lot of coaching. Eventually, you have to get out of your own way and you have to trust somebody else to help you along the way. But a lot of that coaching where, I had somebody really just taking a look at me and my behaviors, because it's very hard for us to look at our behaviors, with that type of perspective that is needed to create real change. So, that's where I say that the coaching is really beneficial, because again, and you have that support system and you're engaged and you're obviously committed, and you have that accountability now to somebody else. Whereas if you're alone, it's so easy to just quit. It's so easy to say, oh, well, I don't have the time today, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, you have to
And then
make
you
some.
kind of revert to your old ways.
Yeah,
It's
you have
very,
to make some discovery of your habits, or you quit.
yeah,
And if you're driven not to quit, then eventually
yeah.
you're going to have to
I
make
mean,
some.
for me is, for a long, I did it alone for a long time. I also had that belief, oh, I can't afford a coach. And so it really held me back for the longest time. I didn't really realize the benefit of the investment. I didn't see the value in the investment, because it is a luxury these days to have a private coach, and if you look at life coaches, they're not cheap. Life coaching is not cheap. So a lot of people look at it as like, oh, having a personal trainer, having a life coach, having, even having a cleaning lady, those are all luxuries, right? But we have to realize that this investment that we make is not only life-changing, it's not a luxury, it's literally, for me, it became a necessity. It really became necessary for me because the way that I show up now today, as a mother, as a girlfriend, as a daughter, every single one of my relationships has changed. My outlook on life has changed, my attitude. I used to wake up every morning with anxiety, panic attack. That's no way to live. I keep reading in the paper, like the average person, the average, not the average, the amount of strokes, the most amount of strokes and heart attacks happen on a Sunday, which is the day before you go back to work. People are extremely stressed. Now with this pandemic going on and the political, it seems like the world is just going crazy, and I think we're going crazy. A lot of us, it's very difficult. There's so many external stressors that, it doesn't help us. And the fact that we're so connected on those social networks, it doesn't allow us to be with ourselves. We're constantly, being influenced by the media, by this person on Facebook said this, said that, people insult each other. It's stressful. Everybody goes through it. And so the more we connect on that level, the more we disconnect with ourselves, because we're constantly wired to listen to this and that and this and that. And eventually you lose yourself, your sense of self. You don't even know what to believe anymore, right? With this whole COVID vaccine thing that's going on, I have so many conversations. I don't know what to do. If I get vaccinated, I'm getting judged by people. If I don't, I'm getting it's like, what am I supposed to do, right? And it's very stressful. All these things are added stressors. And I think it's clear to say that the emotional health of this country has never been in a more it's at its worst right now. It's really.
I couldn't agree with that more. We're in a pretty precarious situation
Mm-hmm.
in terms of our spiritual and
absolutely health. Yeah.
So, Flo, please tell people where they can get in touch with you. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Yes, so I have a website. It's www.therelentlesslifeproject, all in one word.com. And then, I'm on Facebook. I do have a private community on Facebook called the Relentless Life Project as well. I can send you the link to it if anybody wants to join, but
yeah, I'll put them up.
Anybody is welcome. And if you want to, take a look at what I do, or, you can go on the website. So, a lot of what I do, I'm on Instagram and on Facebook mostly, but on Instagram, I really focus on the Relentless Life Project, which is my life coaching business. And really also, the goal is to not just educate people, but lift people up as well, because a lot of people are suffering right now. And
I think the goal of a coach really is to work with people that need coaching, so that eventually they will have more agency themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Flo, I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to put those links up when we get done here.
Sounds good.